Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 810. This is a Thursday night special for those of you watching live. Yes, it is. We do these from time to time in the summer. We're doing a Thursday night special because I am on vacation next week. Yes, indeed. So technically, this show is for July the 26th, but we're doing the show on July the 22nd. So welcome. We are glad you're here. Time now for the pre-show. This is that magical time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. So I forgot my little higher resolution camera. So we are on a low resolution camera, which actually, for me, probably makes me look better. You know, I typically use a little Logitech Stream Cam, which is a pretty good little webcam, 1080p. And I just left it because I typically just bring it on Monday. So this is the internal camera. This computer, this is a MacBook Pro from 2019, about 2 years old. And Apple did an amazing job with the audio on this thing. It's unbelievable. The audio output, the input, the internal microphone sounds amazing, but the camera is pretty crappy. But I think the new ones have really nice cameras. But anyway, hey, most people listen, we know that. So let's get everybody on the shoe. And hopefully we'll get a pretty good crowd tonight. We had a great show Monday. If you haven't had a chance to listen to 809, that was Bill Curtis, the legendary Bill Curtis. In fact,
you're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
We were kind of a big deal. That's awesome. It's just like way too awesome. For those that don't know, Bill narrated the movie Anchorman. Although he had an amazing career as a journalist and still has a great career as a journalist. But most people think of the guy that narrated Anchorman. And he's kind of, run with that. In fact, when he was on the show Monday, he had a, Ron Burgundy cutout guy behind him in the room there. So, but Bill did weather long ago. And it was great having him on the shoe Monday. So let's see if anybody wants to play along with us here on a Thursday night special. And again, for those that are kind of new to this, I typically take 3 vacation weeks a year, one in mid to late June, one in late July or early August, and then one at Christmas. And so this is the late July, early August week. Had a good, that deal in June was very much appreciated. It is a hard stretch here in the weather office when you work in this area from January through May. And then in June, I do a number of things. And I'm always so thankful for that week off in mid to late June. And this year it was even more needed after we had the tragic death of our news anchor. And it was just for me, I think 2021 has been worse than 2020. But anyway, so and Bill Murray's on vaccination next week. So everybody's leaving next week. Bill is going to Aruba,
booster
Jamaica.
Vaccination. Yeah. That's right.
Jamaica, man. Give me some rum, man.
I'm going to Kokomo, Indiana.
Kokomo.
All right, I got to somehow make a message here to get our guest on the show.
I love Kokomo, Indiana. I used to be on a radio station there, KI Country. Loved it. 100.5 KI. It was awesome.
100.5 KI, playing the great hits of the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
It's a great station.
They keep alleging that they're going to do a WTBC reunion. That's the station where I grew up. I literally grew up in that place, high school and college.
Who else will
rock
show
and roll
up?
music.
Who else would come?
The station has those legacy call letters in Tuscaloosa, and they branded it Catfish 100.1, but the AM is still on the air, and they've got the call letters, and they claim that one weekend they're going to give it back to us for one weekend. The TBC jocks take the AM station, not the FM. But
that needs to be like
station.
a telethon. They can make $1 billion for some great cause.
Mhm.
Calling in to
we're
give
all-
you,
all-
paying $50 to call in and give a request to you, James. I want to hear "What You Gonna Do" by Pablo Cruz. How about that one, James?
We'll get that on next. Yeah, we'll get that on for you.
Or how about "Fox on the Run" by Sweet? That's another good one.
Yeah, we'll get that on next.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
That's great.
I'm glad you turned out the part where I started laughing.
The other one, Kim was laughing in that one. Everybody was laughing as he was doing those things. I'm thinking, stop for a minute, stop. But anyway, we've got some gold right there.
Oh,
Bill, your audio seems to be a smidgen hot. Are you using your regular mic or?
No, I'm on AirPods.
I don't know if it's okay. Maybe it's just me. Jen, say something.
Something. Hello. Test.
It might be me. It might be me. I think it's me. I have not been. I had a live shot.
You,
I had to do live weather at 4, 5, and 6, and I have not been here. I just flew in here on 2 wheels.
So you're back teaching now, aren't you? Aren't you back doing some getting to get out and visit?
Yeah, I was at a summer program today in Walker County. Yeah, I'm doing the summer programs almost every day now. So it is. I'm back, although our COVID counts are rapidly increasing here.
They are going
great
crazy.
Concern.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the way the numbers are going here. But I've got probably 80 schools booked for the school year already. So,
wow.
That's a lot.
It was pent up demand. I mean, I did a lot last year on Zoom, but that's just not good. So it is just wall to wall school programs. And I'm energized and ready to go.
Hey, Curtis.
Hey, how is everyone?
Great.
Good. Now we got you on here. We're good. And Kim.
Hopefully I don't sound too bad.
Why?
Hopefully I don't sound too bad.
Why would you sound too bad?
Well, I know my office, there's nothing in it, so I get some echo.
Oh, got echo. Yeah.
Oh, you're all good.
Just glad to be
some
in
of our
office.
guests, Curtis, sound like they're in bathroom urinals in an airport somewhere. So you sound really good.
That works.
I sound like that all the time. So. Hey, Kim.
All right.
Hey, Bill. How are you doing?
Let's get this thing going. We are at 8:02. Let's go. Let's roll it here. All right. So channel 1, record. Channel 2, record. And here we go.
Hey, James.
4.
Procedural.
Whoa.
Jen is introducing Curtis. So
okay. All right.
Do it however you want to do it. Sorry, I didn't tell you.
All right. That's okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
We're kind of a big deal. We all live in homes that smell of rich mahogany, and we have many leather-bound books. Hey, WeatherBrains episode number 810. This is for July the 26th, 2021. And most people probably know we're doing this actually in production on Thursday, July 22nd. It's a Thursday night special for those watching and listening to us live tonight. It's vacation week next week for some, including Mr. Murray. Mr. Murray, you're taking off on vacation. Where will you be going next week?
To the Floribama.
The Floribama for the annual mullet toss.
I've never been to the Floribama, but we're going to be in the neighborhood, so I'm going to have to go check it out.
I think we should do this show live at the Floribama from the annual interstate mullet toss. And for those that don't know, this is a joint that's on the Alabama-Florida state line. Thus the name Floribama. And every year they have a big festival where they toss fish across the state line. And it attracts thousands and thousands of people. I mean, we have not done a live show together since one of the NWA meetings, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that's
Um,
true. I was thinking back to like, what was it, Huck's Rib Shack or something we did in Iredale.
Oh yeah, the bar,
that
that
leads
was
that year.
good. That was like awesome. We actually did one show at a barbecue joint. We had some listeners stop by that were driving
Oh
past by
yeah,
on Interstate 20. I mean, we had a great time doing that.
yeah.
But
Like from
no,
other
so
states, they drove there. I was like, oh Lord.
yeah, I mean, it's that was fun. And goodness, we need to go back. That needs to be my pick of the week is the Huck's Rib Shack live shot we did.
I think I've got the name wrong. I need to go
No,
back.
it doesn't exist anymore. It was Huck's. That was the name
Oh.
of the place, but it doesn't
Okay.
exist anymore because I
we,
drive by there often.
We send it down the tubes.
Yeah, we sent it right down the tubes. We closed the joint. So Kim, your heat is building in Oklahoma, I see.
It is. I was just talking on our last show, I know just a couple of days ago, about how we've had a mild summer so far. And yeah, Oklahoma City, not only have we not reached 100 so far yet, we really haven't even come all that close to it. Mid 90s is all the warmer we've gotten. But that should change. That should change very quickly, especially as the week progresses next week. We're going to be dancing around 100. So summer is affecting us after all.
Yeah, same thing down here. We've had a very mild and wet summer, and we'll be doing low to mid 90s this weekend and next week. So it's going to feel like summer. We all knew it was coming. It's just a matter of when. And it's almost here.
And James,
But,
I have an update on my flooding from Monday night. All my leather-bound books are soaking wet.
Wow.
Unfortunately, 5 pine trees slid down the hill into my backyard.
What?
I'm really
Oh, my
concerned.
word.
5
Oh my
huge
gosh.
pine trees, and this is getting serious. This is 4.22 inches of rain in a little more than 2 hours, and it was like, this is not good. This has got to stop. This is the 5th event.
I mean, that's pretty awful for Alabama. Had you seen what just happened in China?
I know, it's crazy.
Something like 7.8 inches of rain. They claim it happened in an hour.
Yeah.
I just can't even fathom that the physical processes that make that possible.
No.
Yeah, our yard is like a swamp, but we at least live on a hill, which means we don't have pine trees that slide down into our yard. We just have tornadoes that hit our house. So, but let me turn it over to Jen, who is going to bring in our guest on this Thursday night special.
That's right. I'm excited about tonight's show. I've got a lot of interests in what we're going to talk about tonight. But tonight's guest, WeatherBrain, is project scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research as part of the Research Applications Laboratory, Weather Systems and Assessment Program, specializing in research at the intersections of transportation, weather, climate, and artificial intelligence. Curtis Walker, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate it. And thank you, Bill, and everyone else for making this possible. Unlike you're getting all the rain here, I think Colorado can definitely use a bit more moisture, especially on the west slope. A couple of nasty fires going there, but nothing like it farther out west in Portland or near Portland as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been pretty dry in Colorado, that's for sure. Well, because this is the first time you're on here, we're going to put you on the hot seat and have you tell us your life story from birth until now, and just have you know. But we want to know what got you into weather. Do you have one of those stories like we do? A lot of us do, that it's you got interested when you were a little kid. So take it away and tell us where you got your interest in weather.
Sounds good. Thank you. Really give us a life story though, but absolutely. So I definitely fall in the camp of weather enthusiast and meteorologist that got interested at a young age. So I grew up in Queens, New York, one of the 5 boroughs in New York City. And there was a family trip. We were on a, Greyhound chartered bus going from DC back up to New York City. And I was probably about 3 years old, give or take. And I remember, just traffic, of course, being on the East Coast, but sitting on the bus, nice, cool thunderstorm, lightning streaking across the sky, hail just banging on the windows of the bus there. And I remember really liking that. And then pretty much as I was getting older, every time we had a big East Coast snowstorm, my dad and I would go stand over the Long Island Expressway, one of New York City's many highways. And I would always just love watching the cars, slip and slide whenever there was a good snowstorm. Every time, snow day, snowstorm, 2 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night, my dad and I were always out there. And so, I definitely got bit by the weather bug at a very young age. And so when it came time to go into, say, from high school into college, I definitely knew I wanted to do something kind of Earth system science related. And I'll say that, maybe I like natural disasters a little bit as well, because, at first I thought maybe I'd go into something more like astronomy. But I said, well, I'm in New York City, so stars at night don't mean anything to me. You can't see them, unfortunately. City lights are too bright. But then I thought, okay, what about, kind of geology and volcanology, volcanoes and earthquakes? And I said, that's for California. That doesn't happen. Growing up, I liked movies like Dante's Peak and Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones, some of the classics there.
Yeah.
But then, I really rested on meteorology because essentially, weather is always changing. It's always different. It's never the same. And so I really like that dynamic aspect of it. Couple this with growing up in New York City, definitely some of the great broadcast meteorologists of the New York City market, folks like Al Roker as well, were, definitely kind of an inspiration for me when I was young. So that ultimately led me to choose meteorology ultimately as my major when I went to undergrad at the State University of New York College at Oneonta, or SUNY Oneonta, for those that are familiar with the system. But what ultimately led me to research then was the opportunity to participate in a program actually out here at NCAR back in 2010. So it's been a while, to say the least. But it was a program that was designed to serve as an undergraduate to graduate bridge for essentially underrepresented students in the geosciences. And so that program was called SOARS. Everything's an acronym, of course. So I won't belabor the point, but the SOARS program really was my foundation, not only into choosing a research career where I find myself today, but also doing this kind of transportation research, or sometimes called road weather research. I met a group out there that I'm happy to say that I work with now. 11 years ago, I met a group and ultimately carried me forward. Started doing projects that kind of first SOARS summer. My first project was looking at how road temperature varied with different materials like asphalt versus concrete, and which one might be more or less safe, say in a winter weather scenario. Later years, actually did a project with NASCAR and looked at how the automotive racing industry actually relies on some critical weather information. And so pretty much once I got bit by the research bug, then I knew I wanted to go to grad school, pursue the master's, pursue the PhD. That ultimately took me west, where I did my graduate studies at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. Go Big Red. Hopefully this will be their year. We're waiting on Scott Frost to do something, so we'll see what happens. Of course, that's not SEC territory, but hopefully.
No, it's Big Ten.
I was going to say Big Ten country. So,
I'm a Penn Stater.
You go
I'm
back to
Big
the
Ten.
old Alabama, Oklahoma, Nebraska. Those rivalries in the 70s were so cool. So I always want to go to a football game in Lincoln. I think that would be so fun.
It is an experience. Yeah, I'm happy to say I went to at least a handful. Not to my shame, not as many as I probably should have. Should have gone to every home game, but at least a good number of them. But yeah, and so my time in Nebraska was, definitely enjoyable, really insightful. Met my wife in Nebraska, so shout out to my wife, Kaylee, at home with our daughter Kalani. I'm in the office because Kalani is 7.5 months old and teething right now. So, AKA being on a mic would be a pretty bad thing right now.
She'd be making an appearance. That's all right.
I can get pictures later maybe, but definitely time in Nebraska was good. And it was in Nebraska where I actually did some research projects that really worked closely with departments of transportation. So I worked closely with the Nebraska DOT as part of my PhD dissertation research, and actually developed a metric for them called a winter severity index that essentially, the same way we give scales to tornadoes and hurricanes, this gave scales to snowstorms for them in the context of what was the impact to the road. So was the road likely to be closed? Was it likely to be, complete traffic jams, impassable roads, things like that? So it was a really cool project for them and remains kind of ongoing research and collaboration. But like all good things, must come to an end. Pretty much then, once I was done at Nebraska, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to come back out to NCAR and be a postdoc back in the research applications lab with that group I had started with, 11 years ago, and go back to doing kind of this road weather research. And so 2 years of a postdoc, then I became a project scientist just a little over a year ago. So that gives me, a little bit more job security, more of a kind of defined career path. And this is where at NCAR, I've definitely gotten more into looking at kind of artificial intelligence, machine learning type applications, but also this whole concept of automated vehicles and self-driving cars. And, how can we make sure that those self-driving cars are going to be able to handle weather, wildfire, winter weather, flooding, hail, tornadoes, just all the wicked weather that can be thrown at them.
So Curtis, talk for a minute about the toll of highway crashes now, because we freak out when we think, oh my gosh, there could be autonomous vehicles driving down the highway, 18-wheelers without drivers. We think, oh, we could never have that because there would just be catastrophic fatalities everywhere. But we already have a ton of fatalities and injuries every year now.
Absolutely. So, about 30, it varies. It actually went up during the pandemic because wide open roads and people driving fast, I guess. But each year there's about 33,000 fatalities. Some years up to 36, 37,000. Some years maybe a little less. And of those, we'll say 35,000 fatalities, nearly 6,000, a little bit less, about 5,500 are due to weather conditions. So you're talking about 1 in 5, 1 in 6 of every fatality out there on the roads is attributable to weather conditions. And, just in terms of crashes in general, about 21%, 1 in 5 highway crashes in the United States are due to weather conditions. It's actually, when you kind of stack it up next to the direct fatalities that are tracked, things like tornado deaths and hurricane deaths, certainly those are very important deaths, but it's actually an order of magnitude greater when you look at those indirect fatalities due to weather-related crashes. And so, when we think about weather impacts to transportation, agencies like departments of transportation, they spend, millions to billions of dollars on snow removal each year. Those crashes, things like the law enforcement response, the emergency services, the property damage. I mean, road weather really is an every year $1 billion weather disaster. And I know that, we focus very much on those $1 billion big hail, big hurricane, big flood. But the road weather one is the gift that keeps on giving, unfortunately, and comes back around year after year.
But what are the biggest culprits, Curtis? Is it fog or hydroplaning or what?
Yeah, so it's actually
all the above. Yeah.
All of the above, right? But so actually, I'm glad you asked that question. Most people think it's snow and ice because when it's snow and ice, you slow down. You get those YouTube videos of the 100-car pileups and all the stuff that's good for TV, right? But actually, it's the wet roads, it's the hydroplaning, it's the rain that's actually the biggest road weather hazard. And yet, and part of it goes into driver behavior, drivers do not slow down during rain anywhere near as much as they do with snow. And, rain is kind of it's that hidden danger. So rain's the worst, snow is certainly up there as well. And then you have, as you said, yeah, kind of everything else. There's the fog, there's the visibility, there's the high wind issues, what have you. There's, even when I was at Nebraska, right when I was getting ready to leave to come out to Colorado, there was, 2 days in a row, crash at the exact same spot. One, unfortunately, was a fatality, and it was due to blowing dust across the road. A farmer in a field was, plowing their field that just happened to be dry. And, probably like a 100-foot segment of road was a complete brownout. And, a couple of trucks got involved, a couple of cars with them. And, those are the things that happen. But interestingly, too, when you look at the distribution of the crashes between commercial vehicles, like those semi-trailers and passenger cars, you actually have greater numbers, at least in the literature, with those commercial vehicles. So when we look at the prospect of those self-driving trucks, and everyone's worried about, what happens if one self-driving truck kills someone, we also got to put it in the context and say, yeah, but how many human drivers also perhaps, lead, unfortunately, to fatalities as well?
Yeah, I'm kind of like Keenan on Saturday Night Live. Ain't gonna happen. I can't imagine, that coming to fruition. But maybe that's my little feeble mind, that can't wrap around that possibility. But when you start thinking about, vehicle to vehicle communications and vehicle to infrastructure and all these terms that you're so well versed in, you can kind of walk us through the various levels of technology. What's it called, Curtis? You said there's level 1 means your car at least has. Go through those things. That's fascinating to me.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I want to step back and say, though, that tech you were mentioning. There's a lot of language in this space, and so there's vehicle to vehicle communication, as it implies. Basically your car. Think of your car, if it's autonomous, sending a message that says, here I am, please don't hit me. And so if all of your cars are talking to one another, and they do this typically through, I want to say it's 5.9 gigahertz, kind of that dedicated short range technology. Currently, there's some question and uncertainty right now with the FCC looking to expand that bandwidth for 5G cell service. But at least the current technology is, kind of on that spectrum, kind of Bluetooth, if you want to think of it that way. Then the vehicle to infrastructure component is your vehicle communicating with fixed assets. So things like a traffic light or a speed limit sign. And where, that traffic light could tell your self-driving car, hey, I'm about to change in, 5 seconds. And so you can adjust your speed so that, you're not caught running a red, or you're not caught, slamming on a hard brake and possibly getting rear-ended by the folks behind you. Now, when it comes to automated vehicles, there's also this notion of a connected vehicle. And that connected vehicle is the one that's talking to these infrastructure around. So your vehicle could be connected, it could be automated, or it could be both. And so really, I think the way of the future is to have both of these technologies on the same vehicle platform. A car that can talk to the world around it, but also a car that can navigate the world around it with perhaps only its information that it's relying on. And so now in terms of those levels of automation, there's 5 of them that are recognized by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA. And so level 1 is kind of your standard driver assist features, cruise control. The vehicle is still driven ultimately by a human driver. But then level 2 is where you get into, say, adaptive cruise control, where now my wife recently got a Subaru Crosstrek, pretty nice car. She had to get red because Nebraska, of course. And so her car, it's pretty cool. She can set her following distance. And so her car will keep a speed, but also keep a distance to the car in front of it. Don't want to get one of those tickets for following too closely, things like that. Then when we go up to level 3, this is where we start to get into more what's called conditional automation, where we don't require a human driver to be continuously engaged, but rather we want that human driver to be able to take over. Then when we get into, level 5 or level 4, excuse me, this is high automation. We're pretty much under optimal conditions. The vehicle is capable of doing everything. And then level 5, which is the fullest level of automation, this is where we enter an arena where we start talking about, do we even give a car steering wheels anymore? Do we even give the human driver that capability to take over? The movie I always like thinking about here is I, Robot with Will Smith. And he was always getting kind of getting getting flack for driving his car manually when everyone else just let their car drive it themselves. And so really, when we look at vehicles that are out there in the market, we're probably more in that level 3 space. Certainly cars like Tesla, that's certainly a big one that everyone thinks of, but there's the Ubers and Lyfts and the self-driving taxis, the Google Waymos, all of those out there, do have different levels, but we aren't quite at that, highest level 4 or 5, at least not on public roads yet. To your comment earlier, Bill, about, like no way, no how. I'm in that same camp with you. I think it's pretty impressive where the technology's at, but I do worry about, kind of the public acceptance. What's the regulatory framework going to be, the rules for these vehicles? Because they really have the potential to revolutionize a lot of things, not just mobility for the public, but also, I think about this in the context of insurance. Like if we're removing the liability of humans, who insures, the vehicle now? And these are, some of these are the challenges for the industry, for the automotive industry. And one of the reasons why they're not thinking about weather as much just yet, because they have all these other problems that they have to solve that, weather it's high on the checklist, it's high on the pecking order, but it's certainly not, number 1, number 2, maybe not even in the top 5, maybe top 10.
I sought out my Toyota Avalon specifically for the safety features. I did all the research and I went and looked, and it's clearly in that level 2 category that you talk about, Curtis, because it has the adaptive cruise. It's not going to let me run up on somebody. It's not autopilot by Tesla or some of these Cadillacs and things like you were talking about. But that's not what I wanted anyway. It really does make driving more enjoyable from those things. Plus just the, collision avoidance, pedestrians. The only problem I have with it is when it engages the emergency brake, like if you're backing out of a parking space, it wakes like a 2-block radius around you. I wish they could calm that down a little bit, because I was just backing out and the car was coming the other way. It's like I wasn't going to hit them. So you learn to fear that. I do like that it grades me. It gives me a grade at the end of a drive. And if I get anything less than 100, I'm really angry, so I do like that, because
so what's your high and low?
Oh, well, it's always 100 until I get, I have one lane departure or something, and I want to like erase the ROM on the car, so it won't, count me. Because, I told my 17, my kid came back from driver's test. He's like, I made a 92. And I'm like, 92? That's terrible. You can't make a 92 while you're driving. You have to make 100. So, I love all those features, and they're really cool. And they're, I feel really good about that stuff. So it made me think, we can't be far away from what you were talking about, where my vehicle's communicating with that vehicle. And if something isn't right, maybe I miss it, but the two vehicles can work it out, and make that sort of thing happen. So that's really cool. Kim, I know you got a question about tech and weather, because we're going to pull this back into the weather arena instead of my car brains that I take us down here.
No, I mean, I think this is a really interesting topic in a lot of ways that intersect with weather and in our area, sort of risk decision science. I think, I'll first make a comment about the risk psychology, about why this is, I think, so hard for us to grapple with, but then also turn to weather and think about why this might be a really, really good idea for especially those situations, Curtis, that you were talking about, where people do get into a lot of trouble, and they maybe aren't expecting it. And we need a fix like this to address some of these issues. Curtis, I think, has heard the story I'm about to share, but I'll just you can just act like you've never heard this before. And it involves someone who worked in his office actually right before he did, or I think you might have worked with Sheldon. It's just to show the limitations of humans and where technology needs to help. So the first comment about risk psychology is that one of the things that makes this so tough on us is that the idea of driving a car, we feel like we are in control. And that idea that things can be controllable, people fear those risks less, even if you're more likely to be harmed by them than things that you feel are uncontrollable. So imagine yourself deciding whether you're going to drive somewhere or fly. One of the things that you're feeling is, well, with a plane, I don't have any control over that situation, even though the objective risk is so much less. Even in inclement weather conditions, planes, there are concerns about takeoff and landing in inclement conditions, but it's nothing compared to the risk of inclement conditions in driving. But that's not what your brain tells you, right? Your brain tells you, well, I've got to do this for myself. And you're not thinking about all the situational factors that are going to inhibit your success in actually executing that. It's not just about you, it's also about everybody else on the road and the choices that they're making. But this is what our brain says to us. And I learned this very personally, that I have limitations to myself, even my own expertise. In the summer of 2010, I was driving up to Oklahoma City one morning for a doctor appointment. I had to get to Edmond, which is just northeast of the city. And it would involve typically just a quick drive up I-35. And then you just get off on a road into Edmond, and it was very easy. But the traffic was really bad that morning. And in Norman, everything had been sunny, clear, it was fine. But as I went toward the city and went north, I saw there was some storminess on the horizon. And I thought, in all of my, I don't know, raised in Chicago superiority, oh, these Oklahoma drivers can't drive in anything. Like, this is not how you behave on a highway. We all go 88 miles an hour. And we all do it synchronously. Like, this is just not how this is done. So I kept with traffic on 35. And then when it split and went north, there's another highway that would go east, and I could get up on side roads and just try to take that up. So I decided to do that. I was just going to navigate myself. And as soon as I got onto the side roads, I started to see weird stuff. I saw, they have these sort of rivets along the side of the road, those ditches to catch water, especially here where we don't really have good drainage. So we have these really deep rivets off the side of the road, and they were filling with water, and water was rushing along, and it was kind of like little rivers on the side of the road. Did that deter me though? Absolutely not. I thought, well, I see river off to the side of the road all the time. They got some rain last night, whatever. And I didn't connect it at all to the traffic or anything else that had been going on. And I kept trying to go north. And I went over sort of a hill, and I actually got to a point where I saw two cars floating. After I went up the hill, I looked down, and there were cars that were floating. And I was sort of in rural farmland-ish area, just on the outskirts of the metro. The Oklahoma City is a misnomer. It's like this very huge rural expanse with a very small actual urban center. So I was in this area where it's just like, what is happening? And I could kind of see a plane of water, and at that point I thought, well, I've got to turn around. That was obvious. I turned around, and the road I'd been on, water was already starting to crisscross it. At that moment, did it occur to me that I was in a flash flood? Absolutely not. I decided to just try to take another route. So and this is me, I was a PhD student. And, I studied, I was at the time studying how people responded to tornado threats. It was the summer before I got to meet you all, coming up to Alabama after that tornado outbreak. But I still was pretty cognizant, right? I just had no sense for what had occurred in that area. And that at that night, there'd been a mesoscale convective complex that had pivoted over Oklahoma City and dumped something like 11 inches of rain in 7 hours. And it didn't affect Norman. So as a driver, I had no idea. Going from one place to another, I had absolutely no idea what this other place, even close by, had experienced. And all that water had glutted and was moving across the landscape. I was in a flash flood and had no idea until I turned back around, and I went and tried to find another road to go north. And a fire truck passed me. And I thought, oh, that's probably not very good. And I came to another hill and looked down, and there was an overpass, and where the hill went down, and there was a school bus floating and like 7 cars floating. And I thought, that's when it actually hit me. I'm in a flash flood. I'm in trouble. And I had been talking to try to navigate around after I'd seen the cars floating the first time. I called my friend Sheldon at NCAR because even though it was early morning, I knew he'd be up. He'd be at NCAR. He does road weather stuff. And I said, hey, tell me what's going on. You know, you're the road weather guy. And he pulled up his radar and it looked benign, right? At that point, it looked benign. He had no idea what the history had been of the water falling on the road. He studied how people make decisions, right, in driving in inclement weather and trying to develop technologies to ameliorate these problems. And he was just like, well, let's try to take you north on this other road. He had no idea either. And I look back on that. I ended up just telling him, you've got to get me out of here. I don't know if I can. You have to get me out of here. Where's a road that maybe is a highway that I can get onto, where there's an overpass? And I got onto one and I drove up and I looked around and everything was submerged. It was the last road I could have gotten on. And I went home and I lived with Gina Esco, who many on this show know, and my friend Angeline. And I was like, turn on CNN. And they were like, they were just having their coffee. Like, what's going on? I mean, you have no idea until you're in it, right? And the only thing, and I love, Curtis, your perspective on this. The only thing I think that would have helped me is if there'd been car-to-car communication where the cars around that were already floating, if there'd been like a map display where you could see how many there were in what area was being affected. And I could have known you can't go there, you know, and here, you know, combine that with some sort of meteorological information. We don't really do a good job of getting observations of surface inundation. And maybe you can comment on that too, that maybe cars are actually our best indicator that water does exist, but at least, you know, it's hard to be the first person to find it, but at least there can be other people who don't drive into it. So I'm hoping you can kind of take my story and run with it. What does this reveal for you about the promise of this technology? And even if it's psychologically hard to think about automation in this context, you know, how might it actually help us in ways we don't, you know, we feel this sense of controllability that sometimes is not actually there.
So I always I love that story, and you know, and yep, Sheldon Drobot and Michael Chapman and Amanda Anderson. Those were my, you know, that was the original kind of road weather team at NCAR, at least when I met them, and they were my mentors and ultimately my inspiration for where I'm at now. So yeah, definitely shout out to them all. But yeah, you know, this notion of, you know, this flash flood scenario or any scenario, that's the whole goal of this technology, is to try to make sure and increase the range of your situational awareness so that you not knowing, you know, even if your brain's not putting the 2 and 2 together, hopefully the algorithms in your car are putting that 2 and 2 together. And so it's, you know, it's coupling it with maybe it's National Weather Service information, maybe it's radar information about how much precipitation fell in an area. Maybe it's even, you know, hydrologic modeling that can ultimately, you know, through the cloud feed into your vehicle and help your car kind of think about the scenario and say, hey, I'm in a known flash flood area. There was, you know, heavy precipitation a couple hours ago. You know, I should at least be alert and be conscientious and start thinking of what are my, you know, what's my road height? What's my bridge and culvert height? And how can I map the safest route to get there? Because that's what this is all about. It's not, you know, it's part the most efficient route, but the most efficient route is also going to be the safest route. Because yeah, if your car is floating, if your truck's floating, you're not arriving at your destination. So, you know, I definitely agree with this, you know, this broad capability. You know, how, if, for example, if your car came in that situation, you know, long before you pass the river on the side of the road, you know, if it said flash flood ahead, turn around or take alternate route, you know, that message, you would have gotten it, you would have made some decision. And this is where, you know, that technology might be closer than even your car making that decision on its own. And that's really where I think the value comes in from the weather enterprise as a whole, partnering with the transportation industry, you know, both from kind of state level and transportation officials there and automotive makers as well, to really, you know, figure these problems out to ultimately make sure that people don't put themselves in harm's way. You know, when it comes to flash flooding, I always like thinking of Arizona, because maybe other states have done this, but they're one of the few states that has a law that says if you drive your car into a flooded road, you're liable for essentially the cost of the rescue. Sometimes they call it the quote unquote stupid driver law, that I've heard it referred to among friends. But, maybe it's that kind of level of carrot and stick to try to start making people take better or make better decisions. Just the other day, I was looking at a TikTok video, and, someone in a big pickup truck drives under a bridge that's flooded, gets halfway, and then their truck, starts floating and doing a 360. And, he has to wait for the firefighters in the boat to come paddle out to him, take him off and bring him back. And those stories are repeated time and time again. And, I imagine some of those folks maybe deliberately drove in thinking it wasn't high. Other folks, maybe, especially at night, I always worry about this. It's not easy to see water over the road at night until you're in it. And so I think this is another area where the LiDAR, the camera, the radar on a vehicle can perhaps do better than our own human perception can.
Curtis, I'm really interested in the whole automatic vehicle concept. I'm still on the fence on how I feel about it in terms of, Kim's analogy with everything. And we want to have control. So I've got control of my own car, and knowing that there's a car next to me that has nobody in it kind of freaks me out. But I'm interested on a personal level because my brother works for a company up here in Ohio that deals with this, with the automatic vehicles. And they have a huge test track. And there are highways here in central Ohio. A lot of things are very connected to Ohio State. And there's a corridor here. One of the state highways is a test highway up and down US 33. So I would like to kind of just pivot into the whole testing. How does testing work? How do the sensors work? How, just kind of explore here, how does the car know that it's windy, that there's wet pavement, that it's icy, that there's fog, all the weather features, like how does it know that? I'm just really curious to know, if it runs into a rainstorm, how does it know that the visibility's dropped and there's a car next to them? So kind of explore that.
It's a great question, Jen. And, this is the unknown, because right now, weather data is not directly getting into these vehicles. It's the hope and it's the horizon, but we're not there yet. So in terms of kind of the current state of testing, there's a lot of on-road testing that occurs in places like, sunny Southwest, Arizona, California, Texas, Florida. Maybe there's a rain issue there, but yeah, not a whole lot of testing happens in, Michigan or, during a blizzard. A lot of testing happens in Michigan, but not necessarily during the worst weather conditions. And so the Federal Highway Administration, they are actually currently doing a lot of road weather testing. And so one of my co-authors on that AMS paper, in which I talk about kind of the future of automated vehicles in a weather context, Brenda Boyce, she is a part of that team that's doing some of this testing where they're taking these vehicles on a closed track, maybe Ohio, maybe Michigan, maybe Virginia Tech, I forget where, something like that. But then they're creating ice on the road, they're creating rain. And so these test tracks have instrumentation so that they can make rain of different intensities. A lot of the outdoor tracks, as long as you have cold temperatures, you can certainly make ice and snow as well, just like you would at maybe, say, a ski slope. And they're seeing how the car reacts to different scenarios, like, what happens if there's a lane shift on the road, or what happens if you're following another vehicle in front of you, and, kind of where it performs. And in terms of, the instrumentation, different vehicles will have kind of different sensor packages. Many of them will rely on kind of optical cameras, just, a camera that can do some object detection, see where things are, just like your eye. Many of these automated vehicles also will have some combination of radar and or LiDAR that are, essentially looking at electromagnetic beams at different wavelengths. And it's those technologies that perhaps can pick up the precipitation, but it actually might be the case that the precipitation is the noise. So, your radar and LiDAR, they want to be able to see a building, a person, another car, but a snowflake reflecting that energy back at the sensor might actually be the noise that's in the way and interfere with that detection. So there is some weather-related applications and testing occurring. I'm sure there's probably a lot more that's in the proprietary kind of a business to business arena. And whereas I kind of look at it in the more, say, academic lens, where, I may not be aware of those kind of business partnerships, but there is certainly this interest in understanding how do the automated vehicles behave in adverse weather. And so Federal Highway Administration is, kind of leading some of the testing, at least on, say, the public side, but there certainly is testing occurring also at the business level as well.
How many automatic vehicles are out there now? Do you know? I mean, they are out there driving out in the public.
Yeah,
Do you know?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I'd have to consult Google, but I don't know. I don't have an exact number for you, but I can certainly say you're absolutely correct. They are out there now. I was reading an article that said, New York City is going to have a self-driving car running around the streets as long as, the mayor and the Department of Transportation agree to, give it whatever special permissions. There are automated trucks that are out there that are making deliveries. All of the automated vehicles typically still have a human driver ready to jump in, but chances are, unless you see all the antennas and cameras and things sticking off of it, you probably wouldn't even know if you drove, if you drove by an autonomous vehicle until something happens, right? And then that makes front page headline news. Those dangerous self-driving cars are, gonna make us, the Terminator or something like that's gonna happen.
Well, I thought I read an article that there was a semi, or there was a truck it wasn't that long ago, and the amount of time that it trimmed, making the cross country trip was, it was huge. It was like in half or something.
Yeah.
So I know that there are some benefits in that type of stuff, when you're talking about, the truck drivers, getting fatigued and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting technology. Where are the ways that it can go wrong? You're talking technology. So where are the ways that it could go wrong? What you're dealing with some shortwave stuff, but are you dealing with internet, Wi-Fi stuff? Where could things go wrong where all of a sudden the car just stops and there's issues there?
Definitely, that's one of the challenges is understanding the limitations. And, most of your operating conditions, if you think of your normal distribution or bell curve, for the most part, your operating environment's going to be in the middle. It's going to be routine, and it's not those really edge cases. But when we start to think about weather, and especially extreme weather and climate change implications as well, we're dealing on those margins. We're with the edge cases where, I'll even jump into, solar space weather a little bit as well, and the dangers that are presented, if we have a solar flare and a coronal mass ejection. What's that going to do to these satellites that provide the critical GPS and navigation and communication and the electrical infrastructure? Thinking back to the Texas ice storm, imagine that on a much bigger scale. The solar event might be the extreme, but it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. And so when we're implementing this technology, we do need to think about what are those fail safes? What are going to be, the checks and balances? So I'd say, the solar one, that's a definite extreme. Connectivity, as you say, thinking about Colorado, where I live now, certainly the mountains, or even where I live by the airport, and I have no cell service. I assume, or I've been told, it's because, given the plains, there's no cell towers there. So, if I don't have cell service, what kind of connection is my car getting when it needs to, upload this information? And so I think one of the key questions is how much of the processing is going to happen on the vehicle itself versus how much is going to happen maybe in the cloud that it kind of connects to and downloads. And I think that's a big unknown. People talk about big data in our field, and this is massive data. When you think about every car, every second, every lane mile out there, it's huge, and someone's going to have to process this, and we're going to miss cases. There's always going to be, something new that arises. There's lots of conversation too about how much DOTs and transportation agencies can maybe build infrastructure along roadway corridors to try to supplement some of those gaps as well. But I guess maybe the good thing is hopefully it's a good way to stay employed, because it's just a massive amount of challenges that lie ahead, both in the weather context, but even just the general, application of automated vehicle context as well.
Curtis, you saying that, the open road called and everybody started driving long distances, because I did choose to drive instead of fly for about 17 months. Took my first flight this week, and it felt really good to do that again. But, there were several 13, 14-hour drives in there, and it was like, 4 tools: Google Maps, Waze, radar scope, and a cup phone from WeatherTech. The 4 tools that got me through these ridiculous drives. Because, you can look at Google Maps at any point, look at any road. How did that sneak up on us that they did that? I mean, that is a beautiful use of technology. I was even vectoring my wife back from Anniston today. Between radar and Google Maps, I could sit here and tell her where she needed to go. How come we can't, since I know those tools and can use them, the crowdsourcing of ways to get around accidents, the real-time traffic data, knowing that hail core is going to cross the interstate just south of Knoxville, it's time to stop at Cracker Barrel or wherever and eat lunch. When is that going to become available to the non-meteorological oriented driver, to help them route around, active weather?
I really love that idea, Bill. And I know in our kind of chat here, so does everyone else. I think this, I agree with you 110%. This integration of existing technologies, we have it already. Let's put it together. Let's develop this capability. Some of the work that my teammates are doing may be more specific to the transportation agencies than kind of the consumer or general public level, but it is absolutely trying to have road segment by road segment alerts so that we can essentially alert users, whether it's a plow driver, a state trooper, an emergency manager, or ultimately the general public as well. Hey, this based on this radar image and this severe storm intensity, we know that it's going to cross the road. You should speed up or you should slow down. So, thinking about that funny story I had, it was July 4th weekend, driving on Interstate 76 in kind of northeast Colorado. And, I could see that there was a cell coming, and radar scope said it was 2-inch plus hail. I'm going to say I made the conscious decision to go fast. I won't say how fast, but to go fast to beat the storm, because I knew that not only if I slowed down or waited for it to pass, one, I'd probably be in it because there's not exactly a ton of exits off of I-76 in spots. But then the other problem was, the whole, whatever it was, cold front, trough axis, I don't know what, but the whole thing was just blowing up other storms. So it was kind of like, if I could get ahead of it, I'd be ahead of it. And if I waited or got in it, I'm going to be in it for the next 4 hours then. And then it's just going to be those gully washers with the monsoon season. But yeah, as you said, we as meteorologists and weather savvy folks, we can kind of do that integration in our head. But what about giving folks a platform that streamlines it and simply tells them, here's this road hazard, or here's this road weather hazard, and here's a couple recommendations. I absolutely love that. And I think, again, I'll say, that's probably closer and can be delivered on our smartphones, the almighty smartphone. That's probably closer than the fully self-driving car, sit back and watch a movie with the family as you drive those 13 hours instead. But I'm going to say too, I'm right there with you. I'm a control freak, and I love the road trip. And so even the talk of, electric cars, I know it's necessary from an emissions standpoint, but I'm just like, I like my 5-minute gas and go stops. I like my, 15-hour drives. I've driven, coast to coast on different interstates. So yeah, it'll definitely change the road trip. That's for sure.
I think one good thing that's going to come out of it, and it occurred to me in this last week, that if the towns that were, bypassed by the interstates, what's the town in cars? The
Radiator Springs,
yeah, Radiator Springs. If all the Radiator Springs that got bypassed could suddenly make sure they had the electric fuel charging stations, it might take you 30, 40 minutes to charge your vehicle, but you could get out and discover some parts of America that, you just don't see from the interstate. I hope towns will take that up as an opportunity. Those towns that are near the interstate, that have some, scenic or historical, maybe really good food scene, whatever it is, I think that would be cool to me to help, rediscover America. And I think for those people that are in travel, which I'm involved in, it's kind of incumbent on us to try to help make that happen, because it's on us.
I agree. You can tell I have kids, right? Because I knew that off the bat. Cars is one of my favorites out there. But
well, my wife is from Gallup, New Mexico, and she swears that it was modeled on Gallup, New Mexico. So she thinks that's what they were thinking of when they made Radiator Springs.
Yeah, the scenery would certainly align. But I agree, and I did want to say this question of electric vehicles. There's a weather implication there too. So your electric vehicles will actually have different efficiency in different conditions. So for example, the same way now, like if you have a really strong headwind and your fuel economy is in the toilet, if you're, especially out here in Colorado, like if you have a 70-mile-an-hour headwind on a high wind day, you're going to be stopping a lot for gas. The same applies though in the electric sense. Different weather conditions, too hot, too cold, what's kind of the battery discharge. And I'll say I have not seen a whole lot of research in, how will either electric or zero emission vehicles behave in different weather environments or regimes. And so, I think there's all kinds of fun ways that, weather plays into society and into transportation.
Something that I really love about what you were just talking about is, we can think about this existing on a lot of different timelines too. We can be giving advice to people, for example, in the very short run, like the situation that I was in, or what you were talking about, having a longer planning horizon for, okay, what should I be doing over the next 30 minutes to an hour and a half of my, I'm doing a distance drive. My car knows it, it's plugged in, and it knows the weather I'm going to encounter it, and it can give me this advice. Because I think that actually is maybe even more valuable, because some of the research that's been done on why people drive into inclement conditions like flooded roads suggests that the reason is because they are just so single-mindedly focused on having to get where they're going, because at that point they haven't rerouted, and to reroute would take a lot of time, and they're just not in that frame of mind. They encounter it and they're just like, well, I'm just going to get through it because I've got to get where I'm going. So it seems that it's really important to catch them before that point and at least get them thinking about, you might have to have an alternate route. You should consider, that there will be alternatives to make, so that they're actually ready to make the decision. So often we feel like, decision making is just an instantaneous process people make immediately. And the thing is that, especially in situations of risk, that's most often not the case. We have to go through a multi-stage process to process it, and think through what we're going to do about it, and then just knowing that a hazard exists for most people is not sufficient to change their behavior. They have to know something to do about it. That's where we're kind of missing the piece, I think, with road weather. And I really love this idea of bridging the gap farther out, because exactly what we try to do for ourselves as meteorologists, we could really give that power to other consumers, and that you keep them from getting in that situation altogether. Just keep them away from it. It'd be tremendous. And in that case, hopefully for all of us that can speak to our desire for that control, because I'm like you. I love my road trip. I love the freedom of driving my own car. And, for me, it's about all those things too. So I'd really love this, sort of tool to empower me to do it as safely as I can.
Yeah, no, definitely. And certainly, Kim, I know we've had many conversations around this topic as well. And, yeah, would definitely love to, try to knock down some of these barriers, in collaboration in the future. And, I'll even go longer and say, the time horizons, it can be that kind of pre-trip planning. If I'm Amazon and I need to ship my package from New York to LA, and I want my, next day delivery or whatever, it's that kind of level of planning and being realistic about what you can promise. But I would even say, we can go longer horizons as well, especially when we start looking at weather patterns change, certainly climate change. That's an important piece to consider as well. Are we seeing shifts in the frequency, the magnitude, the nature of those extreme events?
Have you had any conversation in the road weather community about bridging things like high resolution, short run convective models, things like the HER or the HER ensemble, the sort of ensemble of ensembles we have to do forecasting for things that exist in more the mesoscale now. Is there conversation about leveraging the modeling capabilities with this technology, so you could create something that's not just, okay, here's where hazards currently are. It is that it's really truly a forecast. Here's where they're going to be in that window of time when people are actually like making those choices and driving through, navigating that space.
Yeah, so great question. And yep, those conversations are occurring. I'll say, fingers crossed the almighty funding that researchers pursue pans out, maybe in some regards. But absolutely, yeah, it's a nowcast problem and it's a forecast problem. And so leveraging everything at our disposal, not just our longer range, global models, but our short range deterministic, as you said, the HER. I would even go a step further and say this whole, the buzzword of machine learning and artificial intelligence and things like that. But it is very true that, leveraging algorithms that can identify patterns to give us kind of sensible prediction and impacts. Because, that's certainly the space that I work in. It's not, I will not try to pass myself off as a modeler, nor a social scientist, as you are, Kim, kind of in that regard. But I'll say, I look at integrating the two and coming up with that decision support side of things. What's kind of the useful information we can try to convey to whoever the end user is, to the company, to the person, to the emergency manager, and what have you there. So I think, yeah, I'd love to see it happen. And I know, I'm not the only one out there pursuing this. So I think collectively as a road weather community, that capability hopefully will come in due time, that we can extrapolate what's happening currently to what's going to happen in the future. And this aligns well with things that the National Weather Service is doing, the Warn On Forecast initiative, and, or what is it? Impact-based decision support services, IDSS. All of this plugs in. I think one of the actual issues, and I mentioned this in that BAMS article, is kind of who's the hierarchy? Is it National Weather Service that should be, in charge of everything? Is it the private sector weather enterprise? And I think the question of who and kind of what's the workflow in terms of the information, that's a tangled web that needs to be figured out still. And I won't, I don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. I'm there to support the community as a whole. But I think it's a question of, are BMW is going to get weather information from a private company, and if you drive a Volvo, too bad. Are we going to kind of have these fiefdoms, these kingdoms of weather information being provided to different vehicles? I hope not, but it wouldn't surprise me either.
Oh my gosh, yeah, what happens when you have a bunch of cars that have different services, which they could essentially be running on the assumption of very different forecast outcomes. And then, yeah, they have cars that are just doing possibly all kinds of different things. That is fascinating. You could almost imagine being in a world where people would know that there are cars that are more conservative and maybe more permissive with risk, right? That could actually become a feature that you look
you
for.
could change your risk. You could your risk tolerance, Kim.
You could change your tolerance either within a company. You could know that different companies lean, their programming leans different ways. That could be a really interesting aspect to all of this in the future, because one of the things that private industry and weather forecasting often does is they lean very, very conservative with their forecasts because they know people's decisions rely on it. So things like precipitation forecasts, the POPs will typically be a little bit higher from private sector vendors than from the National Weather Service. There is a wet bias because they know that the consequences of people being caught in the rain without being aware that there could have been a chance of rain are so high, they get a lot of blowback from that. Whereas the National Weather Service doesn't quite, get that same degree of personal blowback and people who are coming at them like, I paid you for this. I deserved to not be in this situation. So it will be really interesting to see how that could translate to this forecasts and automation and decision-making nexus. Curtis, you raise a really, really interesting point there. Talk about the brave new world, right? There's just so much that could change. And what timeline do you think this is all going to happen on? Is this like a 20-year thing? Like I might have kids in college or, graduating college by the time you and I, our kids might go to the same college and be roommates. They're the exact same age. But we'll have kids, in college. Or is it something where it's more like, oh, it's actually just when they're in kindergarten sort of timeline? What do you think is the timeline for some of these things coming down the pipe?
I think it's a good question, and it's a very tough question, because I look back at, some of the original automated vehicle statements, and it was, by like 2015, we were going to have self-driving cars. And then it was 2019, and then it was 2020, and then the pandemic happened. And so I think what you keep seeing is there's always this push, it keeps rolling back, it keeps slipping. And so I think that my guess, and this is just a guess, I'm going to say you're going to see some capabilities roll out within 5 years. I think that there's enough interest in this area, and there's certainly enough, existing intellectual intellectual property and capability that you'll see some of it start rolling out in the next 5. But I think for a widespread, kind of, this is a default feature, it's not a high-end model or whatever, that might be the kids in college one, the 15 to 20 year horizon before it's kind of ubiquitous across the board. That would be my prediction. Certainly I think, I'm among the group that want to see it happen, sooner, faster. But yeah, we'll see, because I think there's also that whole regulatory framework as well. And I think, it's always this battle between regulation and innovation. And, you don't, in the road weather community and in kind of the transportation community, you certainly don't want regulation to stifle that innovation. And, you don't want to have this set of rules to work in that are too restrictive as well.
Curtis, it seems like I read in your article that there are no references to weather in the federal guidelines to autonomous vehicles. That seems kind of scary to me that got missed. And how do we correct that?
Yeah, it was, and I can't recall the specific, what version of it. I know that weather issues were talked about, but they were certainly, it fell in the side of, it'd be nice to have, but yeah, we're not going to mandate it now. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning, all these challenges and decisions with just making the cars work under normal conditions in city traffic with mixed drivers. Those are those bigger issues in terms of, how do we make sure that weather is in there in an appreciable way? Hopefully it's things like this that maybe someone out there listening, the light bulb's gone off in their head, and, maybe I'll get an email tomorrow. That's the hope, right? But, I think it's this ongoing conversation with the different communities, with the different stakeholders, and really the key players to try to move this ball forward together. And that was the whole purpose of that BAMS article, was to, really highlight and underscore this issue and draw attention to it, to build this community of weather and automated vehicle scientists together, and develop relevant policy as well. And so, committees I serve on with different groups that are, kind of have that policy framework every time I get the chance, I say, what about weather? What about environmental issues? To hope that, one by one, this ends up in those policy documents. So, I think that's certainly my hope, that the more people that start thinking about this and talking about it across the board, the better off the end product's going to be.
It's a couple of Saturdays ago, get afternoon big thunderstorms. You can see it rolling into the south side. I'm picking a restaurant with an outdoor patio so we can watch the storms roll in. But, after a few minutes, you realize this is going to get pretty serious. Water's getting up to the bottom of cars. And, you see this stuff happening in real time, and drivers are just plowing on. They have no idea. They don't put two and two together. So I'm like, we got to finish eating so we can drive around and go to all the high water places and look. Pretty soon, sure enough, there's that word that lets you know that things are bad. Water rescues. We get all the way to water rescues before, we really start taking action. And that just seems so crazy to me that we let that happen. So hopefully we could put the crowdsourcing element and the weather service and the cams and all these cars know exactly where they are on the GPS, and these polygons are so specific. It just seems like there's so many things that could be tied together. So hopefully all these things are happening in great places out there. Let's make sure I'm not leaving anything out. Kim, anything you wanted to say before James asks all the hard questions? I got one more really important question for Curtis. Did you have anything else?
I am good. This has been an extraordinary discussion, and something that we all are at least a little bit aware, that it could be coming. People have heard about things like automated vehicles, and just thinking about this intersection. What an exciting place to work. And Curtis, you just know your stuff. It is so good to know that there's someone like you working in this area. It makes me feel much more comfortable with what's going to come down the pipe. So thank you for all the good work.
Thank you, Kim.
Absolutely. The competence and confidence is really amazing. Curtis, Jen, anything else you wanted to add? I want to say one more thing. Curtis, I think it's really important that a lot of underrepresented communities see you as an example. So talk about your work in diversity and different things that you're doing in our industry to help make sure those underrepresented communities are getting represented.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that question, Bill, because really, and maybe this comes back to my roots as a SOARS intern at UCAR way back when, but I really think that, as we develop these solutions, we want to make sure that they represent the communities that they're going to serve, because we don't want, different demographics, whatever, communities you want to define as here. We don't want them to get left behind, because far too often we see all these articles about, AI bias. The one I like going to is the presidential predictor. You show an algorithm, a picture of all the presidents we've had, and then you show it Barack Obama. And then it's like, wait a minute, this one's different than the other ones. And the only thing that's different is the color of skin in that case. And so, my own efforts in diversity are always trying to pay it forward, looking out for the next generation. And so I'm happy and really privileged to be in my position at NCAR, where I can mentor students in programs like SOARS as well, and kind of pay it forward in that regard. And so I'm pleased to say that the SOARS student I'm mentoring this summer, he'll give his final talk on Monday. On a kind of a transportation and weather-related project. So I'll wish him luck there. Shout out to Eamon if he's happens to be listening. But, beyond that, as you said, being a role model, being an example, letting other students of, again, whatever underprivileged background they may come from, students of color, socioeconomic status, you name it, what have you, letting them know that you can be whatever you want, you can pursue what you want, and also telling folks that, don't, and maybe it's easy for me to say as someone who has a PhD, but don't get wrapped up in the degree. Don't feel like just because, maybe you didn't finish college or maybe you didn't finish graduate school, that you can't be involved here because there's a lot of space for a lot of different voices and there's a lot of different skill sets that are going to be necessary. So, I firmly believe that, yeah, the best solutions and outcomes come when we work with a broad community and make sure, we look at the people that can afford a car and the people who can't afford a car, the people who take public transit, the people who ride a bike and walk. We have to think about everyone as we, work on these grand challenges of what our society is going to face in the future.
Yeah, and the folks that can afford good tires and the folks that are getting by on ball tires, or the folks
Yep.
that can afford Rain-X and new wipers, and the folks that have the beat up, that makes it dangerous for everybody, and that evening out that inequality is so important. I think it's just amazing what you're doing, Curtis. And, I know your family has to be proud from those days standing on the LIE looking over, watching the demo derby happen, when the snow and ice came, and now you're making it better for people. And I think that's just great.
Yeah, no, it's certainly come full circle, right?
That's awesome. James, now it's time for you. We've asked all the softballs. You ask the hard questions now.
So this is a low tech question, and again, the automation, all this stuff, the AI, this is outstanding, great discussion. But let me just go back to some basics about weather and cars. Why in the world do people they're not getting tornado warnings when they're driving? They're not. Why is that? What's so hard about this? This should have been the case 5 years ago, 8 years ago. People are dying every year in cars and they don't get the warnings. And yeah, people say, well, you got WEA, you need to be checking your phone. So you're going to be driving in this raging storm, fumbling around looking for your, phone, trying to pull up these alerts or looking at a watch or whatever. That'll get you killed too. I mean, why is it that we don't have some way of pushing tornado warnings and flash flood warnings, the same warnings that are pushed out via WEA, into some type of little display or something, a little dot, anything in vehicles? And I drive a 12-year-old POC that's got almost 300,000 miles on it. Maybe we have that now. If we do, I don't know about it. So what's the holdback here? What's the deal? Do the car manufacturers not want to do it? Why? I mean, everybody on this show is smarter than me. What's the deal?
It is a wonderful question, and I wish I had an answer for you. I'll say, I'll use my wife's new car because, she has the fancy 2020 car in the family now. I'm driving my 2016 still. Her car doesn't do it. We rely on that WEA. We rely on that phone ping. And I laughed the other day. There was a land spout just east of us in town, and it's like my phone didn't get the alert, yet I'm looking right at a tornado. And so, that was a fun one too. So yeah, we can't rely on the phone. I think it's a capability and it should be developed. As for why it's not, that'll be a car manufacturer question. I do believe, I should say, I believe some of the cars, and I want to say high end, I'm thinking Mercedes-Benz, BMW. I feel like I've read an article recently that said some of those vehicles are getting kind of a direct feed from kind of a private sector vendor. But again, yeah, it's not a feature that's across the board for, my base model car versus my high end fully loaded feature car.
Yeah, I mean,
it's really tough to track all those cars in real time. Google does it obviously with traffic, but it would take a lot of computing to continue to track where they were. It just seems like a weather partner out there could develop this, keeping up every few seconds, whatever it is, and knowing when they would hit a polygon. It just looks to me like it would be a lot simpler. It might take a ton of computing, but it would be. And with CarPlay, I think that's, one of the other things that was really critical to me when I chose my car. I had to have that Apple CarPlay. And when I got in a rental car in DC this week and didn't have it, I felt really lost without it. So I was wishing for the 13-hour drive by that point.
Bill's head would explode if he drove my POC. I mean,
I find some burrito in the back of it that you lost in
right. It does look like the Turkey Creek. It looks like the Turkey Creek landfill, and it still smells like a 15-year-old boy. And our son is now 23 that made that odor in that vehicle. So, but really, you got. it's like there's some force trying to prevent this. Did the car dealer, the car manufacturers not want it? I don't understand that. Most people that lose their life around here, they're either in cars or mobile homes. And we're not getting warnings to these people in cars. And, sometimes in the weather enterprise, we fuss at people. Well, you should have been aware of that warning. You shouldn't be driving into a tornado warning polygon. Well, how do you know? And again, the notion, well, you should be checking your phone. So you're supposed to be looking at your phone while you're driving, looking at weather data and looking at radar. None of that makes any sense. So that's one of my biggest issues here. And maybe
I don't think WDT
maybe we don't.
I don't think they have Radar Scope as an Apple CarPlay product. By itself, if you had nothing else but seeing yourself on Radar Scope, at least you could see when you were driving into a polygon, and that would be important to be able to, that might be a start. But James, you're right. It doesn't seem like it's that insurmountable problem.
We just need to go east and west of here. We've got where we are. We've got Honda to the east and Mercedes to the west right here.
And Kia to the south, or Hyundai, whoever it is, one of those.
Right. So go ahead, Curtis. I'm sorry.
No, sorry to jump in. I was going to say, I do think you see a lot more capability with fleet vehicles, though, whether these are large commercial. This goes in this arena of there's these business to business partnerships where, say, a trucker, driving for a company across country, they might be getting that capability. The problem is, your POC does not get that capability. And so I think, it's this question of, how do we get everyone on the level playing field? But it's needed. The other piece I did want to say is, and Kim can attest to this, we can give people the perfect forecast and the best information. I think you're always going to see people drive into the tornado, drive into the flooded road. Why? Only they know, and hopefully they live to tell the tale as to why they made the decision they did. So I think we can have all the bells and whistles you want in a car. Someone's still going to not take that desired action, and that's why it's so important to make sure we get that human dimension piece in all of this as well.
We need to make sure Facets is looking at this, for down the road, because I think those threats in motion are going to be so critical. And then the rubber will meet the road. Hey, it's like Curtis, if I'm going 110, I might get through before this hell core crosses the road. No, we're going to stop at the Love truck stop here and cool our jets for a while and let this one go by. It's got real possibilities to it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it sure does. I'm sitting here thinking that very thing.
So back to the self-driving vehicles and the automation and everything, and I'm all in. I love stuff like this. But what about geological events like earthquakes? Curtis, is that part of the equation here? Let's say you get a magnitude 6 earthquake in Los Angeles, and everybody's got these self-driving vehicles, and roads buckle, and what do you do with that?
Well, I'll say the geologic side, I made that choice when I was 10 years old not to go that route. But I would imagine, it's a similar problem, right? There is that continuum of threats. It's not just weather, it's other, it's that deer jumping out in front of you on the road as well. Specific to the earthquake, one thing that I am scared by, and it actually goes back to Kim's example and story. Will my car know that the road is flooded? Because my car will know that a road's there. So I could be driving in a whiteout, a blizzard. I could be driving in the middle of the night. My car will know that the road's there because Google Maps, in the background tells it, you're on this road, don't worry. But will my car realize that the road buckled, the bridge is washed out, the road is under 6 feet of water? How's my car going to know what's 2 inches of water on the road versus what's 2 feet of water on the road? I'll say that's the thing that scares me, is making sure that your car, doesn't kind of, get overzealous and say, I know where I am because I have all these great tools at my disposal, but I don't know that the situation I'm in has changed.
Well, I knew I was in trouble Monday when my hot water heater, which has a detector on the floor, sent me a message as we were coming in on the Mount Vernon approach at National Airport in DC. My phone clicks and says, hey, you got a hot water heater alert. And I looked at the radar and I went, oh my goodness. I called my wife, I said, you getting some rain? She's like, she looks like the Gordons of Gloucester fishermen out there, pushing water out with a broom. And, it was like, that's how I knew. It was from that hot water heater sensor telling me there was water on the ground.
So
that
let's
won't
talk
work
about
for a
electric
car.
cars. Yeah. And again, we got to take a break in a second, but so, again, this electric car, I want to get an electric car. Who has an electric car here? Anybody
Does POC
have
make one, James? You keep talking about this POC. Is that a make or a model?
That's called a piece of crap is what that means.
Oh, that's what it is. I got you.
Yes, that's exactly what that means. A POC.
Glad you didn't say something else.
And some yes, I'm about to say some people call it a POS, but I choose to use the word POC. So does anybody here have an electric car? Anybody? No. So Curtis, you don't have one?
There's times I think about getting one. I'm in Colorado, right? I should get one. But I count myself in those folks. I drive too much, and there's not enough infrastructure for it yet, so that I can reliably charge on my 13-hour drives.
Yeah, that's the other, because I'm really interested in, but again, I live a life where I'm still in the middle of life. I got to drive to a school that's 2 hours away, speak, and get back. And every second I've got to be somewhere. I've got to do something. I got products and services I have to produce. I don't have time to, go find a charging station. When's it time to buy one of these things? Because I really do want to get one. But when will they be affordable? And I think that's important. We need to get away from the big oil guys. I mean, when's it time, Curtis, to get one of these things? How long is that going to be? I think that's a start.
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly, at least in the current environment and climate we're in, there is a lot of push to make these electric vehicles affordable and also more attractive, to have them, to have charges that last longer, batteries that charge faster. I'm going to guess that affordable EVs, I mean, there's some in the market now, right? There's like the Chevy, there's like the Nissan Leaf, the Chevy Bolt, or the Spark, or maybe I'm rambling off names here, but I've definitely looked at them, and they're no more than a Ford F-150. They're probably cheaper than a Ford F-150.
And now you can get an electric Ford F-150 that'll go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
Well, and actually, when Texas had their big deep freeze, I saw an article that said people with their F-150s were actually using the electric, to power their houses. So I'm going to say, I think the electric vehicle is not the problem. I think it's the rest of that infrastructure, so that people that want to, go skiing in the mountains of Colorado, want to go hiking wherever, want to go for that, cross-country drive, can do so reliably and safely. Without worrying about where they're going to get their next charge and how long they're going to have to be there for.
I think the hotels are key in that too. The hotels have to step up, and because that's a logical place when you stop for the night that you can reliably count on being able to charge. So I think that's a key component of it.
Yeah, or folks like me, I live in an apartment, and I don't know where there's an electric charging anywhere near my apartment complex. I think everyone. And that goes back to this question of, demographics and the haves and have-nots. What do you do about people that don't live in a house or have a garage that they can plug in at night? Maybe for me, I don't have an EV because I have nowhere to plug it in. Maybe at work, but pandemic, we're working from home most times now, right? So yeah, that infrastructure is, the thing that's definitely keeping me from diving in more seriously.
And I think that's a large part of this infrastructure bill that's, in front of Congress. They need to be making ways for things like that to happen, being forward thinking. And I hope that they're doing that. So,
if they got chargers like at Buc-ee's, Bill, like
yes,
those big places like that.
Yeah, the Love's places and all those places, just rows of them. The Sheets is in the Middle Atlantic. I mean, 20, 30 charging stations. And I think that's where we're going. And I think it's going to behoove business owners, a multifamily, that's going to become an important amenity. course, apartments are hot right now.
Yep.
If you're building a new hotel, you need to be putting these things in. And I think that's a great place for the federal government to step in with some grants and different things to help encourage that to happen. Because you're right, James, we've been needing to get off oil for 20 years or 50 years. And, it's just, the whim of some prince who decides he wants to drive prices up or whatever. We just need to get away from it.
I've not been to the Buc-ee's. I love a good gas station hot dog. I need to go to the Buc-ee's.
Now you're going for a brisket. You don't do hot dog at Buc-ee's. You got to get brisket.
Yeah,
man.
I understand. They've actually got brisket at this place. It's like the Walmart of gas stations. So the reason I'm thinking of it, I drove past. I did a live shot in Leeds this evening, and I drove right past that thing. There were like 10 million people, and I needed some gas. And I'm thinking, goodness, I don't know how long this is going to take. I mean, I want to go when I can enjoy the situation. So anyway, we got to call a timeout here real quick. Curtis, I'll warn you, we're going to be asking you for a pick of the week in a few minutes, something that is weather related, a website, data source, hardware, software, or whatever. But we're going to take a break here. And again, we're doing a Thursday night special. So we don't have Tony's report this week. We do have a This Week in Tornado History. We'll be back with Weather Roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
This week in tornado history, it was a day that came to be known as Black Friday. On July 31st, 1987, one of the most powerful tornadoes in Canadian history struck Edmonton, Alberta. It is the deadliest known tornado for Alberta and the second deadliest for the country. 27 people were killed. This significant tornado was given a rating of F4 with maximum winds estimated at 260 miles per hour. The tragic event led to the development of Alberta's emergency public warning system, which would be implemented in 1992. It was in Edmonton's main industrial area where winds were estimated in the F4 range. This area is known as Refinery Row. Per the Atlas of the Edmonton Tornado and Hailstorm, a decade of research by Robert B. Charlton, the tornado traveled between two operating oil refineries and it came dangerously close to Edmonton's largest chemical plant, an Edmonton Power Thermal Electric Generating Station, and the Maple Ridge Mobile Home Park. Tragically, 12 of the 27 total fatalities occurred in the industrial area. The Evergreen Mobile Home Park was devastated. A 2-block wide area of damage was observed, and 170 mobile homes were destroyed. Some trailers disintegrated, and others were piled 3 high. 15 people were killed. In the midst of such devastation and chaos, there are always those tales of miracles. An infant, barely a week old, was ripped from her grandfather's arms at the Evergreen Mobile Home Park when the tornado hit. Baby Kristen was thrown 100 meters and found alive by a stranger. The stranger gave the child to another woman in the neighborhood, and when she turned around, the stranger was gone. She gave the baby to Bill Clark, a police officer who rushed her to the hospital. The baby battled brain swelling and compromised lungs, but survived. Read our very detailed summary about this event at tornadotalk.com.
Now, wait a minute. Kim, tell your story about a wine tasting at the Buc-ee's. I mean, this is good stuff. Then I've got to go to one of these. I've got to go to one of these things.
Yeah. That was an unexpected life event. I was part of the service assessment for the Weather Service after Hurricane Harvey, and I was going around with the team. And you're in Texas, and we were going to a bunch of different places, and so we had to get gas a whole bunch, and we knew that Buc-ee's was a thing. And many of us were not from the region, so we were very excited when, our trip just happened to coincide with a Buc-ee's outside of, I think, Fort Worth. And we went inside, and there, right inside in the front lobby, right after you go in the front doors, was this delightful Southern belle of a gentle lady who was holding bottles of wine in her hands, and she said, "Hello, welcome to Buc-ee's." And she invited us to try. I mean, I don't think it was Buc-ee's brand wine, but it was undoubtedly some business affiliated. And I mean, they have there's a actually a wine festival in Lubbock every year. There is wine grown locally in Texas, and I believe that it was Texas wines. So we only had a little bit, because we were on business. But oh my goodness, was that ever something? You go in there and that is just not what you expect from a gas station. And I knew immediately I was in a different land. I was in a very different land.
Yeah, gas stations are not the place to be doing wine tastings. It doesn't seem like.
Right, but it's not a gas station. Like you
No, I
have to
know.
go
It's
inside of
a
it to like really experience the. It's a magical landfill.
this one has surpassed the Space and Rocket Center in Alabama as the state's top tourist attraction, I think.
It's a magical experience. All right, so Bill Murray says he wants to sub for Aubrey tonight. I think he's going to read an email for us.
We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
I'm the interim email officer tonight. Question for Span from the Alabama Weather Authority, or for Jen. They read an article, News 9 in Tampa, took a screenshot, sent it to us. In the article, it says that the 1974 Ewan tornado was moving at 100 miles per hour. Is that true? James, you want to take a shot at it?
Where's JB when you need him?
Well, the warning said that. As I was there, I remember I was 12 years old. And when you hear a tornado warning say that the tornado is moving at 110 miles an hour, and you know that 60 is bad, 110 must be twice as bad. And it turned out to be pretty bad. I don't think it probably was moving at 110 miles an hour, James. I think that was, probably a transitional, what they were working with back then was, that RATS radar remote and an operator in Centerville looking at the storm. And it sure got my attention. Jen, you got anything to add to that?
No, I've not heard that. Has there ever been I don't know if there's ever been in history that one has moved that fast. I don't know though.
Yeah, I don't. I think
I've
that's
heard
probably
50,
unlikely.
60 miles. Yeah, that seems too high, but
And
it certainly got me attention.
They issued like a tornado warning for like 8 counties, didn't they? Like
no, it's more than that. They issued a tornado warning. I'll pull it up so I can get my finder to open on this new M1. They issued a tornado warning for the northwestern quarter of Alabama. And I want to say it was like 12, 15 counties. It really was the kind of night that just the warnings scared you so badly that, you went to sleep thinking you weren't going to wake up the next morning. And it really was a terrifying night, for people in Alabama.
I got a note from a chipmunk from the Tornado Talk Discord server. It was moving at 70 to 75 miles per hour.
Yeah, that makes more sense. But the warning did say that. It clearly did say that. And I'll pull it up. I've got it right here. We have all the warnings from that night. James got a bunch of the real teletypes a few weeks ago, and that was quite a present. I'm hoping he'll leave that to me in his will. Of course, I'm going to go for what he does. But let's see if I can find that. It's just, just a terrible, terrible night. For sure.
And we should, while you're looking at that, we should mention that we have done a series of shows on the super outbreak of 1974.
Yeah, we even read them all one night.
Right.
Yeah.
One night we kind of recreated the event and read those warnings. And we've had a lot of the professionals that were involved in the event, J.B. Elliott and Bob Ferry and people like that. So anyway, we'll try and put
here's something interesting, James.
To the shows.
1022 severe storm report. They didn't even type the header. They just wrote on the teletype, just type severe storm report. Urgent. Huntsville National Weather Service office abandoned. Tornado bearing down on the Huntsville jetport. Huntsville area should be especially alert. Tornado warning already in effect. It's just such a chaotic night. But here's that warning. A tornado warning is in effect until 11:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time for most of the northwestern quarter of Alabama. Tuscaloosa, Lauderdale, Limestone, Madison, Colbert, Lawrence, Franklin, Coleman, Winston, Marion, Walker, Fayette, Lamar, Tuscaloosa, Peak. That's one warning. And the warning said numerous large and very intense thunderstorms continue to move rapidly northeast across these areas at 65 to 70 miles an hour. They've already produced several tornadoes. And then this was I don't know if please be advised of the following. Centerville radar hook echoes. They saw 5 hook echoes on, at that simultaneous time. And at one time said that the storm in Marion County, I think this is probably, I'd like to find that, but I can't quite come across it right now. But it was just a chaotic night. So I appreciate that question. And I think we cleared that up.
There you go. All right. So let's do a quick weather roundup up. We've talked a little bit about, Kim, your heat building. You say you might hit 100.
Yeah, the forecasts are looking like they're right on that line. And so I think as we get closer, we'll have a better sense for whether we'll be able to really hit that. I wouldn't be surprised though with how extremely stout this hot air dome is. That's going to be, as we talked about in the last show, is this ridge that's sort of expanding, and so we'll be sourcing some of that air. I personally think we're going to make it.
Yep. 'Tis the season. All right, Curtis, what's happening in Colorado? We're getting that monsoon rain there.
Yeah, it looks like at least the eastern slopes will. I think the west is still going to be kind of warm, but the east slopes, we have a pretty good chance of storms. But that same ridge that's kind of centered over Kim is going to kind of start oozing this way too. So I think we're looking at high 90s, chance of storms every day, typical late July Colorado weather.
There you go.
Lots of flash
Jen?
flood watches there. Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. Crazy.
Those, especially where we had those wildfire burn scars from last year. Now, kind of, without any trees there, whenever it rains, all of that mud and debris just flows. And unfortunately, had a flood in one of the canyons, I think just last night or 2 nights ago, and at least one lost a life there. So yeah, I got to watch out in those mountain canyons.
All right. So, Jen, how's your weather in Ohio?
It has been murky. As I've said that a lot for a lot of the Ohio and Tennessee Valley stations with the wildfire smoke. It's just been really kind of a dulled sunshine and poor air quality. A lot of air quality alerts across the entire region. It's been so quiet. I've had enough time in the forecast to actually explain why it's so hazy. And the temperatures haven't been too bad. We've had some nice nights, which is great since my air conditioning went out. So it's all about the fans and the windows right now for me. But temperatures are coming up, humidity's coming up, a couple of chances for rain, but not too bad here in the Ohio Valley.
And down here in the deep south, we're going to be trending hotter and drier. We could see some low and mid 90s this weekend and next week. So it's going to feel like summer. It's been kind of, Bill Murray said 72 inches of rain this month. And he'll be glad for the dry. Bill has trees flowing down his yard. You got video of these? I mean, I would love to see some video of that. I mean,
well, I could send you a picture.
Would be like that would be absolutely
that would go viral. Maybe I can show you a picture. I'll see here, but I feel so sorry. The people that live at the very bottom where the creek runs through, their house was entirely inundated Monday night. It's gotten in the yard. It's gotten close. It's been around there. And I still felt sorry for them. But then by Monday, when, I came back from Washington, and I mean, literally their entire house of furniture is out in the yard, like Hurricane Katrina or something. And, it's just heartbreaking when you see the impact of what these things, can do. No, I'll show you in just a second. Yeah, here we go. Getting close now. My wife and I text a lot. Hold on a second. Would you like to see my dinner at the Legal Seafood in the National Airport, James? How about that?
See, Bill gets, the $100 dinners in the airport. I go to the cheap Chinese, buffet. In fact, I will fly if I have to fly, through Houston Hobby or, Love Field in Dallas. I'll always go through Houston. They got the best cheap Chinese food in America there. I mean, I am the king of cheap airport food. Bill goes to these joints where he spends $100, $200 on his dinner in the airport. I don't do that. So what'd you have, Bill?
I had a yellowfin tuna and Kung Pao shrimp or Kung Pao sauce, and it was awesome. But there's the flooding. I don't know if you can see that, but one of the pine trees lying across the patio right there. And there's 4 other ones just like that. You see one leaning, it probably went later. I got home and I was like, good Lord, this is not me and a chainsaw. This is like 3 men in a chainsaw.
We had a tree come down in our neighborhood, just, saturated soil. I mean, you could literally push them down with a couple of strong guys.
Yeah, it strictly was washed out because all the roots and everything came up. Yeah, it didn't
All
blow
right,
over.
so let's do picks of the week here. Again, we're doing the show here on July 22nd. It's going to be released to the world on July the 26th. Let's start with Jen. Jen got a pick for us this week.
I do. Breaking news from NOAA. It's actually for the National Weather
Whoa,
Service.
whoa! Wait!
Gotta run the jingle.
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
Thank you, James. The update from the National Weather Service is starting August 2nd. The Weather Service will be conveying a damage threat tag. It'll be destructive, and it actually will trigger WEA. And so if the severe thunderstorm warning is baseball size hail or 80 mile per hour wind gusts, that tag, it'll say destructive, will trigger the WEA alerts. So I think that's great news. It's been overdue for something like that. Now, if it's a considerable damage threat, which is golf ball size hail and 70 mile per hour wind gusts, that will not activate the WEA. So and they said that it's about 10% of the time does a severe thunderstorm warning get to that criteria. So I think it's going to be great to have that to help folks stay safe from that type of damage.
Yeah, I'm all in on that. And if Troy were here, he would be griping about too many warnings. And I agree. I mean, so you get a severe thunderstorm warning. What do? I don't know anybody that does anything. I really don't. I mean, they're just a dime a dozen. They get them all the time. Nobody does anything. I just think there are just too many of these things on that side of it. And I'm not so sure I have the right answer, but what's the false alarm ratio for severe thunderstorm warnings in this country? It's got to be excessively high, because last time I checked, you got to have 1 inch diameter hail or 58 mile per hour winds. And you get these warnings and all the time, and you don't have that. And I don't know what they're doing that for. If it's to appease the EMA community, I don't know. And I just think I'm not so sure you need to change the criteria. Just to me, it seems like we need to reduce the false alarm ratio. But anyway, that's another topic for another event. But anyway, all of the links will be up on our weatherbrains.com. Kim, do you have a pick for us this week?
I do, and it was motivated by the great conversation we had tonight. It's a really approachable piece that it's published literature in the journal Science, but it was published so long ago that now it's open source. So sometimes I share articles that are more recent, they're behind a paywall. This one isn't. I'm posting just the full PDF link. It's a classic in risk psychology called The Psychology of Risk. And it's about something that researcher Paul Slovic called the psychometric paradigm. It's something we've been revolving ourselves around tonight as we've talked about these issues of, controllability and what's known to science and like the things that we're sort of feeling about this intersection of technology and weather. And it's really influential in how we feel about a lot of different weather hazards. So basically the idea is, like we've talked about, people don't just feel more concerned for risks that are like objectively more likely to happen to them. It's not just about how likely it is and how bad it is even. It's also about the attributes that the risk possesses inherently. So things like, is it known to science or is it relatively unknown? We fear things that are more unknown and less well observed. We fear things that aren't as controllable to us personally. And so there's a whole bunch of different aspects like that. I think, it's one of those articles you can read and it kind of transforms the way you see yourself. And certainly in our field, it's very important. So I encourage you to check it out.
Awesome. Again, that'll be up on weatherbrains.com. And Bill, I've got to go. I just dawned on me. I was not in the studio for the early evening newscast. I've got to kind of start my graphics from scratch. So it's like, I really need to get in there, but I wrote an essay on,
yeah, I'm sorry. You go ahead, James. You go ahead, do your thing, but play the Foghorn.
I wrote an essay. My pick of the week. I wrote an essay on climate. I'm just tired of political extremists, right wing, left wing. It's just, anyway, I wrote what I think is a common sense piece on climate. It's a short read, but I think an important read. So that'll be my pick of the week. And I've got to leave, but I will give you this.
I always love that sound, the foghorn. But I can redeem myself. Number one with the guest tonight, Dr. Walker. Thank you so much for being here. Fabulous show, and I knew it was going to be good, but it was even better than I could have even imagined. So thank you for being here tonight. And then coming up on August 2nd, our next regularly scheduled show, Dr. Jonathan Martin at the University of Wisconsin, his book on Reginald Sutcliffe, groundbreaking British meteorologist. He had this book that came out a couple of years ago that I came across. And so we're going to be talking to him about that. That's going to be fabulous. So that's going to be my pick of the week, is all the incredible guests that we get on this show. And just the fun we had with Bill Curtis Monday night, that was off the scale. And the limericks just turned out to be spectacular, and I think they really enjoyed them. We should play some. We should do one for Curtis. Maybe we could.
Oh, we should. Can I just say, I was terrified being the first person to go, because I listen to Wait, Don't Tell Me with my husband when we're driving in the car, and we'll try to answer the questions. And I always think to myself, oh my gosh, these people are able to think on their feet. And if I was in this position, I would just freeze. Like, I would just be so nervous to get it wrong, and then there I was with him asking me a question, which the answer was super obvious, but I was still like, do I really know? Is this really right? I don't know. And you guys were all like, come on, Kim, climate change. It was amazing. It was amazing, but it was also terrifying to go first. So thank you for throwing me into the bus that way. But I survived, and I was proud of myself.
Well, I knew, one, you probably listen to Wait, Kim, and two, you're always, the smartest person in the room. So, I knew you'd come close. But it was so funny to watch Nate, because he was into it. You could see his in the little camera. He was digging it. He was watching for that, iambic pentameter or whatever it is, getting those rhymes just down right. And he knew the answer before you even got to the end. But the way he read them was just so spectacular. You couldn't have even done it better. But I knew we were in like Flynn when I sent them over, because you never know what's going to happen. You send something like that over, and they're like, we don't have time for this. It's a silly weather podcast. And, his wife is sort of like his producer. And she wrote me back immediately, and she said in all caps, love the limericks. We will so do it. Oh, and I was like, oh, we got it made now. So it was really, really, really fun. So Curtis, I don't know if you paid attention, but we had Bill Curtis on Monday night, the famous broadcaster. And, because he, got sort of his start in, the thing that was a turning point in his career was this tornado in Topeka in 1966. And so Jen is our official. She gets like the VIP guest, She got him in and got him nailed down. But I'm excited about that guest. And then I'm going to need some guests, so I better get to work. Anybody has any suggestions, send them to the old email at weatherbrains.com. Well, I guess it's time to put a ribbon on the show. Usually, Curtis, our Thursday night specials are kind of shorter than normal. Tonight we went the full 2 hours.
Are we allowed to give you, Bill? Are we allowed to give you the foghorn if you don't ask our guest his pick of the week?
Oh, I thought James took care of that. I was over here like looking.
We haven't heard his pick yet.
Now Curtis and I had a deal. See, I was going to get him out of this pick of the week, but I know Curtis has got 10 picks of the week.
I really do. I was feverishly picking things here, but I gotta relate it to the topic, and I gotta take it back to New York City. It is, you can find it on Reuters or CNN or whatever, but the company Mobileye becomes the first self-driving car company to take a spin on New York City streets without a police escort. And they want to they want to drive a car in a place with aggressive drivers who don't care. And I love the article because it says pedestrians that don't follow the rules. And I'm just like, yep, just reading that took me back home to Fifth Avenue, to Times Square. And, you walk out in front of the cars in New York City and it doesn't matter whether you have the light. So that'll be my pick. And, I hope, the article didn't say this, I hope they're going to drive those cars in a New York City snowstorm too, and maybe get some good data.
Yeah, I drove once in New York City in like 1995. I think I brought the car from Avis at LaGuardia to the Sheraton downtown, and I left it there. and told them you'll find it in the garage at the Sheraton. But I'm always amazed by the taxi drivers and the Uber drivers and what they are able to do there. It really is an amazing experience.
It's I took my wife there, and she said it's organized chaos, right? Or it's like, or you're going to the toll lane or the merge, and you're like right there, 1 inch apart, and then you just alternate. It just works.
It all works out. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. Well, thanks for a fun show tonight. Any other further business, Jen Nairmore? Kim?
I'm good.
I move that we adjourn.
All right. Well, we're getting close to Jennifer's magic pumpkin hour. But WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We usually do it on Monday nights, except during vacation time. And this being one of those cases, we'll be back on Monday night, August the 2nd, when we'll be talking to Dr. Jonathan Martin. But special thanks tonight to Dr. Curtis Walker for joining us. Great show. Curtis, come back anytime. And we'd love to have you. Keep us posted on all the amazing things you're doing. Thanks for all that special
Thank you so
work.
much for having me.
Yeah, come back anytime. But until a week from Monday night, when we'll be back with this show, as I always tell you, guest booking weather officer Bill Murray for the whole group, telling you to have a great week, great weekend, and always keep an eye to the sky, because you'll always have something fun to look at. All right.
Yay.
I guess we're clear.
Thank you so much, Curtis. It was great to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, everyone.
Wonderful show.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Y'all have a great rest
vacation.
of the week. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, Will, that was a great show tonight. A very interesting discussion. But thank you guys for watching in the middle of the news block over on the TV side. But we will be, again, absent next week. This is our show for next week. So the next regularly scheduled Weather Brains will be produced on August